All right, thanks for joining, everyone. We're going to give it another minute or two, and then we'll get started. All right, let's go ahead and get rolling. This afternoon, I've been watching 16. I've been 17. This is like watching a KQED fund drive as the numbers increment as people log into the conference call. So we're up to 17 now, and if you act quickly, you'll get a calendar and a free box set of something or other. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our February meeting. For those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Kurt E. Waltzen, and for my sins, I'm the leader of this convocation of AWS folk within University of California, at least for this year. And if you have designs on being a leader at a future time, please let me know. We're always looking for people to collaborate with, or to pass the baton to in a not too distant future. So I'll start with my usual nag about participation, both by thanking those of you who agreed to contribute content to this meeting at the last minute today, and to nag those of you who haven't. I actually got a little organized and have posted blank agendas for the rest of our meetings through June of this year. They're out in the same location. So please go out there today and sign up to share some AWS related information, experience, questions, or concerns. That's the primary purpose of the user group. And the more participation we have and the more varied experiences that we can share with each other, the greater the benefits to everyone involved, and obviously the system as a whole. I will also mention here that while it seems early in the year, UCCSC 2017 is right around the corner the way time moves. Time flies when you're having fun. And the intention is to convene the second annual in-person UC AWS user group meeting at that event. I'm imagining it will work somewhat like it did last time in that, excuse me, UCCSC is generally a day and a half, and then the afternoon of the second day is set aside for special interest groups like ours to meet. So if you're actually on the UC San Diego campus, which is where it will be held this year, or if you're traveling to the conference already, please make your travel arrangements such that you'd be able to stay a couple of extra hours for that second afternoon and join with us in person to talk about how things have gone. You know, that will be basically our first anniversary. Talk about things have gone, how things have gone, what things we should change, potentially get some different people involved in organizing meetings, etc., and hope to make this a useful thing going into the second year then. So if you have any ideas in regards to approach or agenda for that meeting, go ahead and share them as you have them. Excuse me. And speaking of UCSD, we'll get things started off today with Adam Tillman from UCSD, who will provide a brief overview of an instructional EC2 deployment that is in the works at that campus right now. So, Adam, are you online?
I am online.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay, good.
I can hear you. Take it away.
All right. So I'm Adam Tillman. I'm from Educational Technology Services here at UCSD, and this is actually a follow-up to something I mentioned, I think, at the November meeting, where we were planning on rolling out AWS Educate here on campus via a centrally managed platform. I was shocked earlier this month, or actually earlier this year, when we finally signed the Educate agreement after about a year of wrangling. And so now we actually have cause to roll some technology out. I'm just going to give a very brief overview of what we're doing, hopefully to draw out anybody around the system that might be working on something similar. I think there's a lot of room for collaboration in this space and in adapting Amazon's tools to the classroom and the instructional environment. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Cool. All right. Just a point of order. Kurt, am I sharing my entire screen or just the Safari window?
I think just Safari.
I just see the Safari window.
Good. Okay, good. Okay, perfect. I've got a large monitor, and that tends to shrink things if the whole thing is shared. Okay, so just by way of background, we have had faculty from computer science, cognitive science, marine biology, and a few other disciplines ask us to support student use of primarily EC2 resources, but other AWS services as well, in connection with their courses. Most of these courses are large, over 100 students. We have one this quarter that's 250 students. And they're primarily spinning up EC2 instances for GPU/machine learning tasks. In many cases, the students are being given a machine image, an AMI, by their TA or their faculty member, and then basically asked to work within the confines of that image on the curriculum for the course. We have taken on the role of centrally requesting AWS Educate credits on behalf of our faculty for each of these students, and in doing so, we're able to pool all those credits together into a single account, and hopefully any overages or any excess usage will be offset by unused credits or savings elsewhere. We do have a small purchase order, or small AWS-wise purchase order as backup just in case, but we don't anticipate actually hitting that in operation. It's important for our faculty to be able to set per student limits, both in terms of what they can do and how much they can spend at each week in the quarter. One of the problems our faculty have experienced with the kind of more freeform, freestanding AWS Educate program is that students will be given their $100 AWS credit code, and they'll run through it within the first week by accidentally leaving an expensive instance running unused. And so proactive monitoring and placement of constraints on what the students can do was one of the design criteria for us at the request of our instructors, so that to help ensure that when the students get to 10th week, they still have money left for their final projects. We are using federated identity management to get these students into AWS. This allows us to keep all of the identity management local here to campus. We don't need to create IAM users within Amazon. The there are a number of advantages to that, but I think for me the primary one is that it's easy to tear things down at the end of the quarter. If we have 500 students, we just need to delete the various IAM roles and IAM policies that map to these federated users, and that's the extent of cleanup within Amazon. Most of our users right now are using the console to fire off their jobs, but we have had requests from faculty to support CLI and token-based access for some of the tool sets that the students are using. And so our model definitely does support that. The access control, keeping the students from stepping on each other, is based on tags. We tag each instance as it's created based on the AWS user ID, the principal ID that initiated the instance. And so within about 5 minutes after an instance being launched, we apply tags. Those tags then allow that student to go in and manage the instance. They can stop it, start it, etc. In the meantime, during that 5-minute period, only a privileged administrator would be able to interact with the instance via the console, but we don't expect that to be too much of a problem. The IAM policies that we've set up also allow an instructor to limit their students to specific instance types, AMI images, security groups, etc. And we've had so far in winter 2017, we've had 4 classes express interest in this. We've got 3 of them up and running right now. One of those courses has decided to restrict their students to a particular image to try to focus their attention on one particular tool set. I'm just going to run through and give you guys a very brief overview of what the IAM policy that we're using looks like. Each course that we provision within the system has a dedicated role and a dedicated policy. This one is for Computer Science 291 for this quarter. It's a machine vision course. And the policies generally allow the students to see everything that's going on within the AWS tenant. That'd be the equivalent of a PS running on a shared Unix time sharing system. We do restrict students to a single zone. In doing so, that'll help us clean up after them, and also constrain any damage that might occur if their credentials do get out and become abused somehow. In this course, they're doing GPU computing, and so we're limiting them to the P2 extra large and T2.micro instance types. We did need to ask Amazon to raise the limits for P2 significantly. By default, an account is limited to 1. And so we have 50 instances allowed at any one time. This is an example of the security group limits that we put in place. This limits the students to accessing their instances from on-campus UCSD IP space, just to help protect against intrusion into these essentially unmanaged virtual machines that they're standing up. I guess key pairs, one thing to mention there is that we're concerned that management of hundreds and hundreds of key pairs within a single account is going to get to be challenging. Later on, I'll speak to that, but for now, we're just accepting that it's going to be a mess. We're letting anybody create a key pair, but not allowing anybody to delete key pairs or otherwise manage them. And this last screen is kind of the meat of the tag-based access control. For any of these actions, reboot, start, stop, get a console screenshot, we only permit those actions on EC2 instances that are tagged with the user's principal ID, which is a combination of their role and their account name here. We believe this will effectively isolate the students from each other, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out in reality. We have some locally written Perl scripts that frequently, every 5 minutes, compare the number of running instances for each of these students against course and user-specific limits. And we'll stop the instances if they exceed those limits. If they exceed those limits by, I think, a factor of 2, we'll also shut down their account. There are some kind of pathological cases where a student could fire up 50 P2 instances all at once, and that could get expensive even if we only let them go for a single hour. We download detailed billing records 3 times a day, and then compare that against the per student budget, and then shut down instances and suspend the student users if those budget thresholds are exceeded. We're not currently enforcing course-wide limits, but we expect that's going to happen at some point in the future once real money comes into play. We've got some departments that want to supplement the AWS allocation with a course materials fee or other sources of funds, and we'll need to ensure that those monies are only used for those purposes. And then right now we're giving our faculty a kind of summary view of what their students are doing on a daily, weekly basis. We didn't find any of the existing canned reports within Amazon to be all that useful for the faculty directly, so we went with the traditional text-based email report once a day, and that's an area we may improve on if necessary. Let's see. So when we suspend a user, we utilize the IAM policies that are attached to each of those course roles. And it's a pretty straightforward procedure of dropping a username into a policy that effectively denies all access. This shuts the student access down almost immediately, within a few seconds. That's combined with stopping of any instances that they might have running. That doesn't completely protect us against ongoing costs associated with that student, but at least gives us it stops the bleeding and gives us the opportunity to talk to the instructor and determine how to proceed. I'm going to give a quick demo of what the system looks like from the student perspective here. I said earlier, we have integrated a local web app with our campus single sign-on. Right now, this web app is simply a gateway into Amazon, allowing students to assume the role associated with any of the courses that they're enrolled in. And so, let's see, I'm going to select a CS291. Now, one of the issues that we're certainly aware of is that the AWS menu of services is absurdly large, and we're really looking to focus the students on very specific aspects of that. So the AWS console may not be the best tool to give the students in the long run to interact with AWS, just because so many of the features by design don't work.
Someday when we have that configurable console and you can only show the services that you want to show, life will be good.
Yes, yes. And now I am running into the I'm running into the account suspension that I had put in place to demo it. I'm finding that my account is actually suspended. I'm not able to do anything here, so I'm going to log out. I'm going to go in and choose a different. Okay. So you'll see that I've been brought in to the AWS console with a federated login. The role is associated with the course, plus the user attribute matches our single sign-on environment. And we are simply offering students, again, many options shown. We're not allowing students to really change many of these. One of the issues that we're facing right now is that students are not allowed to tag because tag permissions are all or nothing. Mm-hmm. The security groups, by default, Amazon offers up the creation of a new one. We don't want to that again, like the keys, would be madness if we had 500 students all doing that. So we're forcing them to use pre-existing security groups. The UI is not really built to default to that. And that's basically it. Let's see. Once the CloudTrail catches up, we will our web service will label this instance that just started with with its owner and with the principal ID, which is kind of the encoded role ID number and the user identifier. Once it is tagged appropriately, we'll be able to I would be able to interact with it in this context.
So you have something monitoring CloudTrail, and when it sees a create instance, then it goes out and runs a CLI command or an applet that creates and applies the tags.
Correct, right, and that's something that could be done. Amazon has a blog article discussing doing that within a Lambda function. We chose not to do that via Lambda, and we've got a Java application stack that's handling a lot of this, and we just folded those duties into the Java code. But it's pretty straightforward to do regardless of what tool set you're using. Then, okay, so that's basically what we've rolled out, and we've got, like I said, we've got about 300 students that are using it this quarter. We've got a half dozen classes that are interested in using it for spring quarter. Right now, we're focusing on EC2, EBS, and S3. Those are the primary AWS services that our faculty are asking for. Many of the other services in Amazon's menu are not amenable to the same management model. And I expect if somebody comes in and asks for student access to CloudFormation or something like that, that's going to be difficult to accommodate in this shared model. But for now, we think most of the interest is going to be in those three primary services. We're looking at key management. Our TAs and instructors have an interest in being able to go in and see a student's work from their perspective. That's something we've offered in other environments that's been very heavily used. And so we're looking at key escrow for the student SSH keys that they might use within AWS. We haven't implemented that yet, but that's on the roadmap definitely for fall. And then finally, the last feature that I think is going to be of great interest to some of our faculty is the ability to support spot instances for students. The spot pricing on the GPU instances can be a tenth of the on-demand prices, and they're very interested in giving their students access to that. Unfortunately, the API for spot instances doesn't allow fine-grained access control, and so we would have to mediate that through some sort of web app. That's basically all I've got to present. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if there's anybody out there that would like to reach out to me to discuss potential collaboration, if there are any other instructional users or administrators out there. I'd be interested in talking to you.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Adam. Do we have questions?
Yeah, I have one. Adam?
Yep.
How are you guys managing backups?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So we are not currently backing up these student instances, but we plan to institute snapshots and basically do rotating snapshots of the student instances, probably for spring quarter. That's something we need to work out the mechanics of that. We also need to work out the mechanics of retention for academic integrity purposes. We have a general policy of keeping those student instructional artifacts available for 5 years after the course, and we need to figure out how to integrate this into that policy.
That sounds like a challenge.
Oh, definitely.
All right. Other questions?
Thanks,
Yeah,
Adam.
I have a question about the domains you mentioned. You have a couple of computer science classes and then marine biology. I'm curious, pedagogically, do the instructors incorporate learning AWS as part of what they're trying to teach the students? And I can imagine that being the case in computer science, but I'm curious in the marine biology case, how much they want students to learn how to work with AWS versus just the content of the course itself.
I would say that that interaction with AWS and teaching the students the mechanics of using that environment are less important to all of our faculty than the particular material they're trying to teach. On the other hand, I think most of these classes right now are either upper division or grad classes, and many of these folks will go on to make use of AWS in research environments. And that was really the motivation for exposing the at least on our part, for exposing the innards of AWS to these users.
Great, thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, one thing before I let you go, Adam, I'm not sure if you can see on the screen here what I'm holding. I see yours hanging on the shelf back there. So, yes, okay. A IT professional preferred equipment, right?
Definitely.
All right. Next up, we've got Greg Merritt from UC Berkeley, and he's going to talk about a weekly data fetcher using AWS Lambda and S3.
That's right. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. I'm going to push this blue button that says share screen. Share entire screen. It sounds fine to me. Are you guys okay?
Yes, I see a screen that says connected corridors program.
Awesome. Okay, so thanks. My name is Greg Merritt, and I work in transportation engineering here at UC Berkeley, and I'm part of this connected corridors program. And the big effort of our program is what we're calling the I-210 pilot. The I-210 is a freeway in the Los Angeles area, and it has lots of congestion, lots of incidents, and managing it is tricky. So we're working with stakeholders there at Caltrans, the cities, the county, and others to help them manage incidents better and specifically understand how you can do a coordinated control of the infrastructure, signal lights, ramp meters, messaging signs, all that kind of good stuff in response to an incident. So as you might imagine, data plays a role in that. And so let me, okay, where is I have to manage there's the present button hiding behind me. Okay, loading. So one of our data sources is it's called count and occupancy data from the freeways, where there are detectors underneath the pavement, and there's a whole network of these installed on California's freeways. And in practice there's lots of problems with them. A few data sources are perfect. You can have some subcontractor doing some other part of work out on the freeway, and they unplug something, or we've had ants getting communications devices and make nests, or a filter an air filter reduce the throughput. So on a hot day, the equipment shuts down and then it comes back at night. Or people steal the copper cabling, the copper electrical wiring that services the electronics cabinets. So it's important that these things be up. And there exists a system that's that Caltrans contracts out for that aggregates this data and does some stats on it. And so while we do, on the one hand, get live real-time data, raw data, if you will, directly from these systems, we also work with our stakeholders on trying to keep on top of keeping the system up in the area of interest, which ends up being organizationally, complex. So my colleague Anthony Patiri, you should see his name here on the slide. You're seeing my slide. He works with our modeling, which is informed by the data. And he works with our stakeholders at Caltrans on this. And folks would. And let me just tell you the other name here, Joseph Chen. He's an undergrad who's been doing some good work for us. And so some of what you'll see here presented is the combination of the three of us working together. So to get a sense of how the system is doing, just is data available and where is it available, where is it not available, what's down, what's up, separate from any data quality, just what was on today, what was off today. Getting the history, doing a weekly view. Typically, someone on Caltrans would go to this site that Caltrans contracts out for, which has lots of wonderful features, and they go and they do a bunch of clicking and spend an hour or two, like every Monday morning, say, and gathering numbers like these and sticking them in Excel manually. Well, that's kind of a drag. So on that web service, I mean, there's a website, right? This PEMS site, a performance measurement system. There's a feature to export text of reports that you like. So then you basically just encode that in the URL. There's a bunch of parameters in the URL. Once you've logged into the site, you can say, you can specify the range of freeway and the dates and all that kind of good stuff, what data set, and it will dump it to you. So this is a nice way to get reports. So, Anthony had started to build some Python and an IPython notebook where he could kind of grab these in batch when he fired it off manually from his notebook. And then he was working with his student, Joseph Chen, to do this in a little more automated way. And they said, okay, Greg, we want to stick it somewhere. Like, can we stick it on a server? I was like, hey guys, remember we got rid of all of our servers, right? Let's see what we can do in the cloud. We use a Lambda function. If folks haven't used Lambda, it's basically an AWS service where you can upload a chunk of code and you can trigger that code to run in different ways. You can have it triggered by other things happening in the AWS universe, for example, or you can just put it on a scheduler and have it run periodically. So what we do is our little Lambda function in Python is just kicked off to run once an hour. And it's a really dummy kind of thing. It knows the date, it knows what day it is, and it knows that weekly reports are available after Saturday. So if it's what it does is it says, okay, I know that report should be available up to this date. Let me go and check our store, our bucket, our Amazon. Our AWS S3 bucket where these data files are stored. Let me go see. I've got a list of what's in the bucket. I know what day it is today. If there's any delta, if there's any stuff missing that should be available by now, let me go. And all it does, really simply, it doesn't go get everything that's missing. It just gets the first one on the list of missing files. Oh, and these files vary by segment of freeway and direction of freeway and all that kind of stuff. So there's like, I don't know, about 10 or 12 files it needs to get every week. So it wakes up and says, oh, there should be some files for me. Let me go look for the first one. And it goes and crafts the right HTTP URL, gets the file, and then saves it in S3, and then it goes to sleep. It's done. Then the next hour, it wakes up again and said, is there anything missing? And it just repeats. And over a couple hours on Sunday, it'll go and fill it out. And this way, too, if things are down or who knows what, it'll catch itself up. Say if the PEM site goes down for a couple days and it's poorly timed, it'll catch itself up. So it's not a high use, high demand sort of thing, but this saves someone at Caltrans having to click and spend a couple hours putting these together. Now, I've only described up to here getting the data and bringing it locally. Then there's the viewing of it. And what we do is we do that through the web. This is the screenshot here is this bucket policy editor. Yeah, I've come to learn a lot about S3. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I appreciated that I knew nothing about it once I tried to work with it. So it is very much a content server, not a web server. You can kind of flip a switch on a bucket and say just everything in this bucket, serve it up as if it were a very dummy web server. If you don't do that, then it behaves sort of very differently. So let's see. Kind of long story short here. What we do is we actually funnel it through one of our project sites. So we close off the resources in that bucket to the whole world except those that are coming referred from our site. So if you're on a page on our site and that page asks for a resource like one of these data files, then AWS will serve it up. And this isn't sort of a high security. It's almost kind of like I don't know. I could show you guys what's in my sock drawer. It would just be sort of odd, but it wouldn't really do me any harm. But it's not something you just go dangle outside. So we have our website with a password login that gives someone an HTML web page that's screenshotted here. There's a JavaScript that goes and fetches the data files and formats them out on this page for folks. Oh yeah, and then the one really funny thing I was looking in the other day. The costs. The biggest cost here is the S3, and it's maybe in the dollars a month. I haven't separated it out. We have some other stuff there. It's still relatively trivial compared to our monthly spend. The Lambda costs themselves for the processing, you pay for it's a product of your of the memory you use and the duration. So if you have something that's 10 seconds and you've allocated 2 gigabytes, that costs the same as something that runs 20 seconds is allocated 1 gigabyte. So we allocate 128 megabytes, and it's actually kind of a slow HTTP response, so it runs kind of for a minute or so, mostly sitting and waiting. But the first 400,000 gigabyte seconds of runtime every month are free. So we don't even come close. That's like 100 hours of run, and we don't even come close to that. And there's a little money for the S3, but there is some Lambda. I believe I just noticed this the other day. I was looking at a bunch of our EC2 pricing. We're getting ready to pay for a bunch of reserved instances. And while I was in there, it's like, hey, you've been running this for like a week and a half. Let me see make sure Lambda's not going crazy. And like I pop up the chart and I'm like, $10? Oh, what's that little? Oh, that's a micro. $10 micro. Wow. And I don't know if they clear those out at the end of the month or if in 10 years they're going to bill us for a few cents or what. But I thought that was really funny and actually kind of shows how the Lambda is probably meant to be used. I imagine if you're Instagram or Twitter or something like that and you're triggering a Lambda function for every image upload, it's going to run up a big bill. But for ours, it's running just taking these very small summary text files. It's basically nothing. And yeah, we just it was just a couple of weeks. Joseph, our student, who's sitting right over there, he's working part time and he's sharp. Picked this up, stitch it together, and it was it's done the job. So it's really great, and we don't have to. First folks are saying, what server are we going to put it on? Do we need to run an EC2? It's like no, just no security patches. Nothing. Just let it trickle away, generating micro dollars, and everyone's happy.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll start off with the first question, which has nothing to do with the technology, but is all about how a team at UC Berkeley got the task of monitoring highways in the greater Los Angeles area over UCLA. Just,
Oh, well, so our contract is actually with Caltrans headquarters, and Caltrans is looking to change how the traffic is managed in the state of California, and we wanted to. So Caltrans locally manages transportation in what is called districts. There's about a dozen across the state, and District 7 is the LA area. And so we worked with headquarters to identify a place where there's the right kinds of problems. Say, up in the very northern, northeastern corner of California. That's not where we want to start. And place where the kind of combination of infrastructure and agencies, instrumentation was about right. So we're starting there, and Caltrans would actually like to roll this out across the state.
Okay, so expected to be a statewide program. This was just a very good test case because it had a lot of activity and the right conditions for you to monitor.
That's right.
All right, other questions for Greg? All right, I guess not. So we'll be moving on. But I will be interested in a report back, Greg, when you get the bill for the microdollars, and
okay.
Hopefully we won't all be doing our budgeting in microdollars in the future. So
okay.
Next up, we've got Carrie Robertson from UC Santa Cruz campus, and she's going to share a status update on their AWS migration. As some of you may recall, I spoke, I think, potentially in our first meeting about an effort that they have underway to move their PeopleSoft from on-prem situation into the AWS cloud. So, Carrie, go ahead and take it away.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So actually, you are correct, Kirk. We are going to move PeopleSoft, but we first decided to start with our identity management systems. So what that involved is a system that we use, kind of a web application that's used for password resets, Unix shell changes, MFA, simple things like that. Our LDAPs, our Shibboleth, and our campus directory. And all of those were migrated to AWS on the 4th of this month. And actually, it went really well. So I don't have a lot to talk about, but I thought I would just kind of go through our timeline and then kind of highlight some of the lessons, like some of the light lessons that we learned immediately after we went live. So to start off, in June and July, we built a different web application directly in AWS, and that helped the team to really gather kind of the knowledge and what services were available in AWS and get familiar. I think there's a big learning curve there, and that simple web application just allowed people to get their feet wet and get comfortable. In August, we focused more around training, getting the team up to date on some formal training from AWS. September through November, we had a couple days a week of working sessions where we locked a bunch of engineers in a room and made them hash out some of the architectural design elements. In December, early on in December, we built our dev environment. We had a consulting come on site, and he had some great suggestions, but it required us to do a fair amount of rework to begin using CloudFormation, and we adjusted our account structure, having a backup account, a security account, a prod and non-prod account per application, as well as our master payer account. We also did a lot of internal testing in the month of December because, as you can imagine, with identity management, we interact with everybody's authentication. So we needed to make sure that we felt that all of our daily jobs were working as expected. In January, we opened up our testing to all of our external partners, making sure that they felt we were ready, but that was kind of more of a PR move because we were pretty confident at that point. And then we focused on building our production environment, which left us on February 4th. We had our cutover, which meant all we had to do was really sync some data, change some CNAMEs or redirect the CNAMEs. And it was actually a pretty smooth cutover. It was a huge accomplishment for the team. We did decide to leave up our LDAPs about 3 or 4 more days. Even though they were stale, the on-premise LDAPs, we found that some vendor applications were binding to those LDAPs, even though we asked them to make sure that they weren't connected to a specific IP they were. So we kept them up and just were able to kind of watch the traffic to make sure that all of everybody wasn't pointing to the on-premise LDAPs anymore, was pointing to the correct AWS LDAP. So that was one kind of, I don't want to say when we knew it was going to happen, it only ended up happening for about 3 different applications. So that's pretty good given the number of applications that use identity management here. We also had one firewall rule change that needed to happen for just something we missed. And then we did have 2 issues that did come up. We had some trouble with EduRoam around, there was an increased latency, although really minor, and users didn't expect it. It was meaning that the increased latency meant that the number of connections at any given time were significantly more than they had been previously, just because that bind was just like a tiny bit longer. So we did have some trouble there, but we were able to work through that. There was a very minor outage. And then we also had some trouble with the configuration between AWS sending alerts to our Gmail our Google groups, making sure those notifications get through. So those were kind of the few lessons learned that we had. What went really well was we had everybody on site for our cutover in a war room, and so anything that came up or any challenges that we had were able to be resolved right away. We had some of our more high-profile applications or higher-risk applications. We had a 2-hour block, what we were calling kind of technical triage, where those people in the war room were just waiting for our application owners to test and make sure that everything was working, so that if they had any trouble, we were all there and ready to help them right away. Campus, received several messages, but in general, nobody really experienced any problems, and it seemed pretty seamless. And then we also were able to get our monitoring in a pretty decent way. Monitoring is one of those features you keep improving as you move along, but in general, monitoring is working really well, and we had some pretty manual monitoring happening the first week, just so we could be sure that the scripted monitoring was working as expected. But in general, it went great. So I just wanted to let this group know kind of what our time frame was in our general plan. That's all I have.
All right. Well, that actually sounds very encouraging. So I'm assuming that you and your project team are again, look very favorably on your experience so far and are ready to take on the next phase of the migration.
Yep, absolutely. We're planning to do PeopleSoft in October, and Banner probably in the fall as well. We don't have a specific time for Banner yet. And the whole plan is to have our identified applications using Solaris off of Solaris by July of 2018. So we should have most of our enterprise applications in AWS within the next year plus.
Okay, excellent. I have a couple other questions. I know going in that you were, as you mentioned, you were engaging an outside consultant
Yes.
to work with you through the project. As a matter of fact, at one point in time, you're talking about having 2 different sources of consultant going to AWS and also going to a third party. Is that still the case? And or what engagement was involved in this one, and what was your experience from that?
Sure. So we interviewed several different consulting firms to help us. 2 were recommended from AWS. The struggle we had with AWS's professional services was that they wanted a larger commitment than we were able to make. We were looking for something like 12 to 20 hours a month, and they wanted, 30 hours a week. So I don't know. It was very different. They wanted a kind of a fuller engagement than what we were able to do, and we sort of just needed somebody to kind of give us a sanity check, making sure that we were on track doing the correct designs, and also kind of cause any tiebreaker or resolve any tiebreakers that we had between the team. So we engaged Info Reliance is who we ended up with, and the consultant we got was fantastic. And in general, we haven't used him too much. He did come out for a 2-day session, which was really valuable for the team, and we've sent a few questions his way since then. But in general, we have not used a lot of professional services.
Okay. Follow-on question to that. Are you still talking to JR over at UCB, and are they still sort of engaged at least in sort of auditing the activity that's happening at your campus, or has that not gotten off the ground yet?
Yeah, I talked to her once in a while. We are doing kind of a swap for training. So in general, when we book trainings, we get 20 seats. And so we both seem to switch about 4 people for each on-site training that we have from AWS, which is fantastic. So more people are able to attend. We tried to engage for the identity management application, but it was difficult because the team was in these all-day working sessions. So that didn't really pan out very well. We're just starting to look at PeopleSoft now, so I'm not sure what that engagement will look like yet.
Okay, and that was sort of my follow-on thought. Well, one of my follow-on thoughts was that since you're doing something that we already know that UCB sort of has that penciled in their future, and potentially other campuses as well. Have you thought about this potentially becoming some kind of a practice that your team with this experience under their belt could bring to bear and actually, serve as a resource for, obviously, for some kind of compensation across the system.
That's definitely possible. I think at this stage we're just focused on getting our project completed. So everybody is completely dedicated right now to getting off Solaris before July of 2018.
Yep.
I think one of the great things about being a UC is that we can all collaborate and help each other. So I would definitely want to facilitate that. But I don't think right now we have capacity to, partake in major other universities' migrations. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like we're all friends here, yes. But like.
I understand completely. You have to get your own work out of the way.
Right.
But once you have your team trained up with that experience under their belt, it just seems like that is a powerful tool for good, potentially in the future. And there might be a business case to be made for that. And in the same vein, you spoke about the advice you got from the contractor as far as the account layout, etc. Is that information being captured in a central location, and is that publicly available, or will that be publicly available? Some of the design decisions you've made, and sort of the after report on whether that was a good decision or not.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to share some of this information kind of on our account structure, definitely, because it was just a recommendation that really worked well for us. I think as far as knowing if we regret any of those decisions, it's only been 2 weeks, so I'm not going to know that right now. Right now, they seem like great decisions still. So if people have any questions around account structure, I think that is one area that we thought we were fine the way that we were doing it, and we're really glad that we changed to kind of this, what we're calling, we have a shared services account, which has proven really valuable, especially as we grow these other migrations and we've got to worry about peering functionality like that.
Excellent. Yeah. Generally, you won't regret the decisions you've made until the warranty expires, right?
Exactly.
That's the way it always works. All right. Anyone else with questions for Carrie?
I had one, but you asked it, Kurt, so I'm good.
Okay. Next time I'll shut up sooner and let more
No
people
worries.
participate. Okay, well, if not, then it looks like we actually did manage to fill our time. Again, thanks once again to the people who volunteered at the last minute to share information with the group. And please, the rest of you and all of your friends and the other people that you're working with on the campus that you know are working on the AWS platform, please get them involved. Go out, sign up for a future session. It doesn't have to be very complex. It doesn't have to be very polished or formal. We've seen everything from people just talking about what they're doing to the other end of the spectrum, and it's all useful. I am still looking to award my prize for the first person who's got a dismal AWS failure to share with the team. Again, under the heading of, you learn just as much, if not more, from your failures as from your successes. So keep your eyes open for that. Also am interested in people from higher up in the campus hierarchy to share with us their thoughts about where AWS fits into the whole IT portfolio that they're considering, what sort of their future plans are, how it compares to things, for instance, that are happening within the medical center community, where they're moving out to their combined data center up in Oregon, outsourcing some of that stuff, the decisions for why you might take that approach versus why you might take a public cloud approach, etc. And as always, I'm interested in your questions and your feedback on how things go here. So feel free to contact me directly if you have questions, concerns, or advice. And last but not least, on the subject of assistance with our AWS efforts, I will again encourage anyone who hasn't to reach out to your AWS account team. We had ours on site again last month. We sat down and had a very productive hour Actually, we went to lunch first, so about an hour lunch and an hour meeting afterwards, where we were able to go in some of our questions and concerns about our environment, and got very useful um, guidance and advice out of them. So this is a free service. They're happy to come out to your location to meet with you, to better understand what you're trying to do on the platform, and to sort of point you in the right direction. So no cost to you other than investing some time, and definitely could bring you some benefit. So I urge you to take advantage of that if you haven't already. Also, will again say, I think I've said it on previous calls, that they have a program called AWS. Somebody help me with this. It's a more formal process where they'll actually come in and look at your AWS account structure, and they will evaluate it based on three criteria, one of which is security, one of which is sort of cost effectiveness, and one of which is something else that I can't remember, but I'll get that information out in my follow-up email. Again, that is also a free service. It's performed by your AWS sort of pre-sales account team, and it can be a very useful review of your account, especially if it's grown up over time, to see what kind of state it is from a number of different aspects, and to sort of give you a gauge for how well you're following AWS best practices. So if there's nothing else, I will go ahead. We can go ahead and close the call out. Thank you very much for your participation. Please talk to your friends and your coworkers, and let's boost the participation up. Next month, we generally have about 20 people on the call. So if we push, we might be able to get 40 people on the call, and that would be more people to share information and also more people to hear information. So thanks again, and have a good afternoon.